I don't know what is it about being woke, but it just seems to make you stupid. You know, it's like it deprives your brain of oxygen or something. I don't know what it is. But it causes what I would think would be normal, intelligent people to just take ridiculous, dumb stances and try to defend them. For this latest Loco Lawyer edition, we have an article here. Was the cop who shot Patrick Lyoya afraid? Perhaps, but that's not the key question. And it's written by Michael J. Steinberg. If you remember from a couple of days ago, I had a video that had him weighing in with his expertise on the Patrick Lyoya shooting and showing to you that, oh my God, the guy has no brains at all. Well, he's going to be our next Loco lawyer. Hello out there. I am trying to get through.
With his powerful brainwaves cradled in the warmth of reasoning, it's time for Johnny Walker Dredd to straighten you out on a thing or two. Emanating all the way from exciting Las Vegas, Oklahoma, it's the Johnny Walker Dredd Show.
This is one of the absolutely silliest things I've ever heard. This is Michael J. Steinberg, and he's a professor at the University of Michigan Law School. Yeah, that's right. And he's going to go on here and break every rule in the book. You'll see. And so it begins. In assessing whether the fatal police shooting of Patrick Lyoya, an unarmed black motorist in Grand Rapids, Michigan, was legally justified, and right away we already have a problem. Patrick Lyoya was not unarmed. It would be a grave mistake to look simply at whether the officer was scared when he decided to shoot Lyoya in the back of the head. We must examine the officer's decision in context. So in other words, while it may look justified, we got to find some way to make it look unjustified. Well, if the actual event looks justified, let's just broaden it and let's include a bunch of other stuff that's not even relevant. At this point, you're not even going to be a lawyer anymore. You're just another woke writer. Okay, let's read on. This shooting is not an isolated incident. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. The shooting has to be weighed on its own merits. Michigan, like other states, has an ugly history of racial profiling and unjustified police shootings of black men. It doesn't make a difference if that's all they do every day. The justification for the shooting has to weigh with what happened on this particular day between those two men. 10 years ago, 8 police officers in Saginaw surrounded, then gunned down Milton Hall, a black man with a mental disability, even though Hall posed no serious threat to the officers. Okay, and unless this officer was a member of that Saginaw team, I don't think this is relevant, and I don't think a judge will consider any of this relevant. What difference does it make what happened in Saginaw? This is a law professor talking. He's trying to bring in propensity evidence that's not even pertaining to the actual officer in question. Have we not learned anything from the Kyle Rittenhouse case? This whole idea that, well, this
guy is loco.
Officer is likely to have done this because what these other officers have done is so ludicrous that I cannot believe that he would even put this in print. But he did. Again, wokeism, it makes you stupid. Likewise, the ACLU has sued the Grand Rapids Police multiple times in recent years for racial profiling. And again, this is probably not going to be admissible. If the officer in question was part of that lawsuit, maybe, but I doubt it. I don't think the judge would even allow this. Right to equal protection. With that background, let's examine the latest shooting. And the background is what? Police officers are evil, and that's why we should convict this officer. That is essentially his argument. On April 4th, about 8 a.m., a white Grand Rapids police officer saw a young black man driving. Why is white lowercase and black uppercase?
That's racist.
That was racist.
Yeah, that's racist.
Oh, that is racist.
The officer decided to call in the license plate number and determined the plates belonged to another car. Yeah, that's kind of serious. Sounds like a stolen car. And I'm digging more into Patrick Lyoya's background and seeing that there might be more to his driving around in a car with the wrong plates than we thought. We don't know enough yet to determine whether the decision to run this man's plates constituted racial profiling. Well, gee, until you do, maybe it's a good idea not to insinuate that it did. But if he targeted Lyoya because of his race, then he violated Lyoya's right to equal protection of the law. Woulda, coulda, shoulda. You have no evidence that he did, and I doubt you're going to be able to get evidence that he did, because after all, what would indicate that it was racial profiling? What, you think he said something on the radio that said, oh my gosh, he's clearly pulling him over only because he's black? Really? Okay. You hold on to that. Video of the incident shows Lyoya pulled his car over in response to the police sirens and then exited the car. I don't know if they had any police sirens, but he then exited the car. There's no mention here that he was not supposed to do that. The officer immediately escalated the situation by yelling at Lyoya. What did he yell at Lyoya? Get back in the car. See, he's glossing over this whole thing. He doesn't want to tell the reader that Lyoya getting out of the car was really stupid, and the officer gave him a lawful command, and Lyoya refused to go along with it. Instead, he just says, well, the officer is just yelling at him. This is just incredibly sloppy writing. But then again, I've never accused lawyers of being particularly good writers. Certainly not as good as me. When Lyoya did not produce a license and walked toward the front of the car, then he also closed the door even though he was not supposed to do that. The officer grabbed him. Okay, that part is true. Lyoya then started to run. How can he run if the officer has grabbed him? Oh, I know, he wrenched himself free from the officer. Let's leave that part out. The officer chased, tackled, and repeatedly struck him to get him to submit. Oh my, we're going to use the submit word, not comply. Why didn't he use comply? He wants the submit word because it implies a master-slave relationship. This is just pathetic. This is pathetic.
That's more like, zany or goofy.
Yeah.
It's the wrong kind of loco.
By the way, no mention here whatsoever that the officer was trying to employ a legal detainment of a suspect. Oh, this is where it gets really stupid. Oh my. Many police experts say the officer committed a dangerous mistake by resorting to violence at this point because, and then I'll go over the reasons here in a moment, but what did I tell you about a week ago when I said be careful when writing technical reports, anything of real importance, of using such phrases as many this, many that. These are empty statements that can be almost always pulled out. They mean nothing. How many is many? 7? 20? 1,000? And if you say many experts say, does that also not imply that many experts don't say that? He didn't say all experts say. So if he says many, that sort of implies that there are many that are saying just the opposite. Okay, so let's take a look at these reasons, and then we'll take a look at the site. Oh, we'll have a lot of fun with it. The motorist was suspected of a low-level infraction. The officer was alone and should have waited for backup. The officer had control of the car and the passenger in the car who could identify the driver. Violent confrontation under these circumstances can lead to needless injury or death. Okay, now, first of all, none of this has any bearing whatsoever on whether the officer was justified in shooting Lyoya. Okay? But let's take a look at this citation. Many experts. Who are these experts and how many is many? Well, let's take a look. And we go to the Detroit Free Press with an article that says, Patrick Lyoya death analyzed by experts. Well, who are these experts? I already did this video. There are only 4. And guess who one of them is? Michael Steinberg.
Hi, I'm the most local person in here.
I mean, you have to be kidding me. He goes, many police experts say, and he points us to a video where he's one of the 4. Yeah. He should have notified the reader that he was one of the 4 here that's commenting on it. First of all, I don't think that 3 is many. And the other one is that when you look at these reasons here, each one of those experts identified one of these things. All 4 did not agree on these 4 things, but that's what the article sort of implies. Again, you got to know how to read these articles, man. Propaganda. Got to know the tricks. That's one of the tricks. According to the video, there is no doubt that Lyoya did not cooperate in his own arrest. Yeah, let's talk a little bit more about that. Like, what did he do and what was his behavior? No, let's not. Let's just gloss over it. We'll have one sentence in the entire article dedicated to the fact that Lyoya was acting like a jackass. But he never attempted to strike the officer or fight back. Really? Okay, the news to me. And I actually think he did try to strike the officer because the witness said, well, you tried to strike him, which implies that Patrick tried to strike the officer. We don't know, but you certainly can't make this claim at this point. Rather, after being tackled, Lyoya stood back up and tried again to walk away. Similarly, when the officer tried to use a taser, Lyoya pushed the taser down, but he did not grab it and turn it back on the officer. Oh, here we go. Step back and de-escalate. Once Lyoya stood up after being tackled, the officer could have stepped back to de-escalate. In other words, let go of him and wait for backup while Lyoya runs away. Lyoya is not going to stand there and wait for the cops to come. He's trying to get away. If you let him go, he's going to run away. He's a suspect in a possible stolen car. And he's resisted arrest. You can't just let him run off. Well, okay, maybe you could, but you're not required to. There's nothing in the policy that says that the officer here had to let him go. And in fact, I think the vast majority of officers would try to keep him. However, the officer appeared frustrated and determined to make Lyoya submit to his authority. Again, submit. He loves that submission word. Again, slave master. That's what he's trying to imply here. And by the way, Lyoya didn't just hold the taser back. He had control of it. It was in his hand. But let's not let those little details bother us here. We're trying to get a cop convicted. Was the shooting justified? Absolutely not. Oh no. Okay, guys, seriously, right now, up until this point, you're thinking, oh, this is horrible. Wait. Now he's going to become a law professor, and he's going to teach us all about the law. And unfortunately, a lot of people reading this are going to assume that what he's going to say here is factual. No, he's going to mislead everybody who's reading this, and they're going to go to Twitter and post all of this junk here as proof that the officer is guilty. Let's read it. The Supreme Court in 1985 ruled that a police officer may not shoot a fleeing felon unless there is probable cause to believe he poses an immediate threat of serious physical injury to the officer or others. That is true. There's only one small problem. Patrick Lyoya is not a fleeing felon. What he's referring to here is Tennessee versus Garner, and this applies in cases where a police officer shoots somebody to keep him from escaping. The police officer here did not shoot Lyoya to prevent him from escaping. He will claim, obviously, that he shot Lyoya in self-defense, that he thought that Lyoya was going to turn the taser on him and incapacitate him. Tennessee versus Garner has no bearing on this case at all. And anybody with any understanding of self-defense would know this. The police officer is entitled to the same self-defense protections as anybody else in the community. And therefore, what it comes down to is, did the police officer fear for his physical safety, and was that fear justified? Then he says, in 1989, the Supreme Court held that an officer uses excessive force if the force used was objectively unreasonable after balancing the severity of force used against the governmental interests at stake. And he should have known when he read governmental interests that this has no application whatsoever to the Patrick Lyoya shooting. This is Graham versus Connor. And the context of this is a police officer who used physical violence in order to detain somebody. What are the governmental interests here? Well, bringing the person in for questioning or for arrest. That's the governmental interest. And so the question is that if you have a person for jaywalking, can you use a baton to strike him in order to bring him in for questioning? No, because the nature of the crime does not warrant that kind of physical force to detain the suspect. The officer in this shooting did not shoot Patrick Lyoya in the back of the head for the purpose of detaining him. If he had thought to himself, the only way I'm going to be able to get cuffs on him is if I shoot him in the back of the head first, okay, you got it. There you go. But I have a feeling that's not what the officer is going to claim. The officer did not have any governmental interest at heart when he fired the bullet into the back of Patrick Lyoya's head. The interests he had were his own personal interests, preventing himself from getting hurt. That's not a governmental interest. Yeah, this is a law professor. He teaches students about the law. Goes on, in making this determination, courts look at all the facts, including the severity of the crime. Again, when it comes to Graham versus Connor, you can't use a baton to strike somebody to bring them in for jaywalking. That's what they're talking about. Whether the suspect poses an immediate threat to the safety of the officers or others, well, that's what the officer is going to claim, right? He posed an immediate threat because if he gets a hold of my taser, he can incapacitate me and take my gun. And whether the suspect is attempting to evade arrest by flight. Again, arrest by flight. That was not an issue here. In this case, Lyoya was not suspected of committing a violent crime. Oh, jeez. He was simply suspected of having the wrong license plate on his car. Dude, the man was not shot over the license plate. What you're describing is if the police officer had come up and said, hey, you got the wrong plates on the car, and at some point the officer thought, oh my God, the only way I'm going to be able to bring him in for questioning or detaining him over these license plates is to shoot him. Yes, in that case, you'd be right, but you're not right. You're wrong, and you're stupid. The wokeness has infiltrated your brain. You can't think straight anymore. Although he ran from the officer when the officer tried to grab him, at the time he ran, he posed no risk of harm to the officer or the others. And that's not when the officer shot him. So what's the relevance?
Loco! Huh?
Yes, it's a law professor. The officer created the danger. Oh, I think that the Patrick Lyoya had something to do with it as well. Rather than de-escalate the situation and wait for backup, which the officer is not obliged to do, the officer created the danger by trying to subdue the man with physical violence and a taser. And when that did not work, he used the ultimate force by killing Lyoya with a shot to the back of the head. Why? To detain him? No. To stop him from fleeing? No. To prevent the man from using his taser on him. Even if you ignored all the mistakes the officer committed before he fired his gun, the shooting was unjustified. Was the officer scared when he fired the gun? Perhaps, but that's not the question. Okay, it's going to get worse. Oh, there he is. He looks like a nerdy Troy Aikman. The question is whether he reasonably feared that Lyoya would either kill him or cause serious physical harm. Looking at the video evidence available, it appears that all Lyoya wanted to do was get away from the officer, not hurt the officer. It appears that that's all he wanted. If I recall correctly, self-defense does not center on what we think would have happened, but rather what we think that the officer thought was going to happen and whether that was reasonable. Yeah, we might look at this and say, looking at this, I don't think that Patrick Lyoya was going to take his taser and shoot him with it. But that's not what matters. What matters is whether the officer thought that. And was that a reasonable belief from the officer's standpoint? From the officer's standpoint, this is a guy who's fighting him. He's bigger than him. He's grabbed a hold of his taser. He's in a long struggle with him. He's not complying. You have to weigh all those things. And under those circumstances, it's quite possible that the police officer thought, hey, this guy is going to use his taser on me. However, if you disagree, then that should have been the focal point of this article. The article should have focused on the officer's misbelief that he was in danger. And why? What things did Patrick Lyoya do that would have let the officer think that Patrick posed no threat to him? But he doesn't cover that. And by the way, he's a professor from practice and the founding director of the Civil Rights Litigation Initiative at the University of Michigan Law School. Before joining the faculty, Steinberg served 22 years as the legal director of the American Civil Liberties Union of Michigan. Okay, hard left. He has no interest in analyzing this from the officer's standpoint at all. He wants the officer convicted. And again, I go back to the evidence box. If he uncovered evidence that would have exonerated the officer, let's suppose it was a videotape of the suspect saying, hey man, I'm going to kill you once I get a hold of your gun. Suppose he uncovered that. Would he take it to the police and say, here's what I found? No, he would bury it. I'm telling you, these people have no interest in truth and justice. They want the cop convicted because it would serve as a political victory. I've been telling you this, and all of these incidences that I've been covering are just proof that that's exactly what their motive is. So Michael Steinberg, you get to join the ever-growing list of Loco lawyers.
With this bandana, I welcome you to the game.
Like my video, subscribe to my channel.
Dummies to the left, dummies to the right, destroy all dummies, fight, fight, fight.